What is suffering and who is the sufferer? Is suffering a prerequisite to any profound experience? Do all of us have to suffer? Or is it that some of us choose to suffer? What is the root of suffering? Before we can identify the root of suffering, who is it that is experiencing the suffering? And then we know. What does a spiritual awakening do? Yeah, so most of you who are tuning in are probably on the spiritual awakening path, or you're going through a Kundalini awakening, or you're on a spiritual path, but you want to unravel more of yourself and understand who you are, why you are, what are we doing here. What happens with a spiritual awakening? Eventually, you move from perception of life through the five senses, because the five senses are very, very much of the body. You move from that to becoming highly sensitive, to introverting these senses, to experiencing extrasensory perception, to having experiences that are out of the body, to having the realization that we are not just the body, but that our body is a temporary vehicle, as are all the happenings, as are all the relationships, as is everything that is happening to us or that we perceive as happening. All of the experiences that then build up our thoughts, that then build up our belief systems, that then equate as our vibrational frequency, including how deeply connected we feel to all that we cannot perceive. All of this together makes up our blueprint, right? Now, if my experience tells me that I'm just this body, I'm these five senses, I was born, there is death, right? So death is something that is to be feared, and really everything that we do is to avoid it. Death causes pain and suffering, right? If that's my belief, or that's what I've been looking around me as I'm growing, as I am an infant going into toddlerhood, going into childhood, going into adolescence. Some of us might lose our parents, our siblings. Some of us may experience child abuse. Some of us may be molested. Some of us may have the most atrocious acts, even losing our parents to calamities, having accidents, losing our limbs, name it. There is an endless list of what sort of things may be perceived as suffering. But the events themselves do not cause the suffering. It's how we are perceiving this and how attached we are to what has happened and how that should make us feel. How attached am I? How entrenched am I in that situation? How much am I just the body? How deep is my understanding? How deep is our understanding about the mechanics of life and death, the mechanics of life, right? Or the purpose of suffering, if there is indeed any purpose in it. How we relate to these near-death experiences, right? Some of us might be stuck in that pain for as long as we can remember. Some of us might still be stuck, though we may have moved on or believe that we have moved on and worked it out. But what we don't realize is that we have merely found ways of coping with that suffering or with how that suffering makes us feel. When we suffer through disease, through ailment, through bereavement, through so many various ways, right? We can experience all these events in our lives, but without experiencing the suffering. That's park that thought on one side. Now, what happens when we are experiencing the pain associated, and where is this pain coming from? Right? So, if I love my mother, I love my father, I love my child, and I lose them, or somebody attempts to take my life away, or somebody hurts us, hurts our loved ones, right? We love them, and so we feel that pang in our hearts. We are in pain. It hurts us when someone hurts those that we love, right? Why? Because of our attachment to them, because of the pre-existing relationship, which is the condition, one condition of that suffering. Now, what happens when someone outside of your loved ones experiences those things? Bereavement, maybe somebody hurt them, somebody tried to kill your neighbor, or somebody, has a broken heart, different forms of suffering, right? How do you feel when you hear of those events? How do you feel when it wasn't your immediate family but somebody outside the nucleus? That there is an event that would have caused you the suffering. The closer you were to that event, the further you are from that event, it doesn't have that big of an impact. Then you had the third one, which is the general suffering of humanity, right? How do you feel about that when you hear about the pain and suffering of people? Again, it will depend on your own consciousness. It will depend on whether you're going, how attached you are to that, right? How attached you are to humanity, to our race, to everything around us. How affected are we going to become? How affected we are by that event that triggers pain and suffering in us determines how we're going to cope with it. Some of us will not want to delve in the pain, so we'll have coping mechanisms. We'll either shut it out or we'll go deeper into it, right? And we'll let it run its course. Or some of us will let it run its course for a while, park it, but it'll have created a sort of shade in our life. It'll always be there. Yeah? And then when we go through a profound experience, because remember, so many of these experiences can also become those experiences that awaken you to other dimensions, other portals. Some of the greatest mystics, seers, revolutionaries have undergone immense, tremendous suffering. If I'm sitting here in front of you today, it is as a result of tremendous suffering. As you are watching this today,